Hi, Jordan. Many
Hi.
thanks for taking the time to chat with me. But really, first, I have to express my really deep gratitude and admiration for the incredible work you did in the narration for the Audible edition of Awe, the
Thank
technothriller. Uh, I and our readers in quotation marks, are extremely fortunate that I could find a narrator that I was able to render so many of the accents of the many protagonists, and with a clarity of diction that I thought was marvelous.
Well, hi, Pierre. It was entirely my pleasure. It was such so wonderful to bring these characters to life behind the mic and find their voices and go through the story, which was just so interesting and fantastic and had me on the edge of my seat even as I was narrating it. So I would love to know, what brought me to your attention as a narrator when you're looking for a voice for your book.
Well, um, I actually was approached by someone directly,
Hmm.
and I thought his voice was very precise. So I actually entered into a an initial contract with him.
Hmm.
And then when he did the first 15 minutes, you know that there's a checkpoint that
Yeah.
ACX does. And that checkpoint just wasn't doing it for me at all. So I had to unfortunately cancel and then start the process of auditioning. So I opened auditions on ACX, which is the company that does the interface between the narration producers and the authors. And I had to go through about over a dozen
Yeah.
people who submitted applications and recordings. Eventually, I narrowed it down to three, and finally, I was really looking for someone who would be able to be very, very clear because some of the material is not super simple. So I wanted to make it easy for people to understand. And I had a hint that you could do accents as well. So that's how it happened.
Well, I am glad that I made the cut. I had so much fun, particularly since the story just seems to be so important right now. Working on this, we were really in the thick of this back in October and November, which of course was a bit of a crazy time in our country. And, a lot of the issues were just so pertinent. So it was actually like, it felt very meaningful to work on it.
And I have to also say that I am, I have to recognize how gracious you were in tolerating my many, many, many requests and revisions. I think you told me that I was one of the authors who, you know, gave you directions for almost every second of every
Well,
chapter.
hey, it's part of the job. I wish that I could sit down and narrate 10 hours straight, perfect, no mistakes, no notes, no nothing, but I can't. So I really think that it works best when there's this collaboration, and there's another pair of ears like listening to it, making sure everything sounds good, and I think that only makes the finished product better. So it
Well,
was.
it did. I have to tell you that listening to some of the chapters actually brought tears to my eyes.
Well, I'm amazed to hear that, even though you wrote this yourself, you knew what was coming. Um, I would love to know, what inspired you to write this story. As I was saying, I found it to be so pertinent to current events. So I'd love to know when you started writing and what was that process like?
Uh, I started to write this in the middle of the first Trump administration, and I was basically horrified by how that administration did not take climate change seriously. Coming out of the Paris Agreement was a terrible mistake. Luckily, things regrouped under Biden, but now I am very worried that we are going to have, and my book and your narration is going to become ever more pertinent, I think, in the next 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was very clear, working on this that there was a message underneath. There was something you were trying to say. So and that's for each reader, they're going to take something a little different from that. But I'd love to hear, in your words, what does this story mean to you? What are the underlying themes that are central to the story?
Well, I think there are basically three themes besides an exciting story with characters that, live with you for a while. But the main one is really that we ignore climate change at a great peril. Um, I've been involved with the SETI Institute for many, many years. I'm on their board of directors. They used to be called trustees. Now, for some reason, we're called directors.
Mm,
And you probably have heard of the Drake equation, and Drake was one of the founders of the SETI Institute. And in that equation, the last parameter that basically calculates the odd that we can actually get a message from a extraterrestrial civilization, and that last function is called L, which stands for the length that a civilization stays around to actually emit, to transmit messages.
mhm,
And I'm worried about our L. In fact, I am so worried that I dedicated the book to L at the very beginning of the book. I dedicate the book to the L factor so that we can keep in mind, top of mind, that we have to be careful. Otherwise, the civilization is going to disappear if we're not a bit careful.
mhm,
In addition to that, there is also something that a very close friend of mine, uh, who's professor of physics at Stanford, is very worried about, and that is that because of our position vis-a-vis China, the China Initiative and other such measures were taken that actually stopped or interfered with the international collaboration and the exchange of ideas between countries. And that is another thing that I think is very dangerous, particularly when we are dealing with global issues. We need global collaboration. And finally, uh, there is the issue, particularly with our generation, well, the next generations, is the fact that scientific rigor must um, be top of mind. We can't be, we can't, you know, make these things at will and invent issues. That's why fake news is another issue that I take very seriously in the book. Um, we have to have facts in order to make correct decisions.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, from the reviews I've seen of the book, there are a lot of, facts that you talked about these complex concepts that you wanted people to be able to understand. And from the reviews, people have commented, I've learned a lot and I was able to understand some difficult concepts. I know I learned a thing or two reading and narrating. And yeah, so I think that was really successful about the book is that you made those concepts understandable in a way that seemed really effortless.
Thank you. Yes, it seems that most readers were very happy with that.
Yes, I'd say your novel became an Amazon bestseller, did it not?
Yes, it was very nice to receive such accolades for my first novel.
So I would love to hear about anything else that you've written, any other books.
Nonfiction, and a long time ago, in 1976 and 77, I had three books published. I co-wrote my first book on chess opening, called The Chess Tutor, Chess Openings, I believe. The second book was on how to use pocket calculators. Back then, the four bangers, little calculators like this were all the rage.
Yeah.
Except this is an advanced one because it has more than four functions. And I, I basically gave lessons on how to use pocket calculators. So you could even do square roots using just the four functions: plus, minus, divide, and multiply. And finally, again, because of my interest in history, and that's basically all I read is either history or science. And I don't read fiction all that much. when I do, it's techno thrillers or uh, detective stories, and real thrillers or spy stories.
Hmm.
But my interest in history is that you do have to understand where we come from. And as it happened, although I was born in LA, in Los Angeles, uh, my parents moved to Switzerland, to Geneva, when I was about a year old. I don't remember. And I came back to the States in 1973 for good
Hmm.
and moved to New York. And back then, 1973, whenever you opened the television, the only thing you could see on TV was the impeachment hearings of Nixon. And everybody was talking about the impeachment clause in the Constitution. And I wanted to read that clause for myself.
Hmm.
And even though and I still have a fairly large collection of books, I couldn't find the text of the Constitution anywhere. Of course, back then you didn't have the internet, right?
Right.
So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have one book, just one book with, let's say, the 50 most important documents of the world so that you can actually learn something and find things fairly easily. So I approached McGraw-Hill,
Hmm.
and to my great surprise, they took me on. Within 20 minutes, I had a contract with McGraw-Hill and put together that book called the major historical documents of the world, milestones of human thought. Now that's something that a
Wow.
title I wouldn't have come up with, but McGraw decided to do it. And that eventually got translated in German. And I just found a couple of weeks ago, I was looking on Amazon and I found that my book had been translated into Spanish as well.
Oh, wow.
So it was published in England, in America, in Japan, Germany, and Spain, I believe. So that's basically my foray. And then I wanted to write a book called The Encyclopedia of Everything.
Hmm.
Basically a graphical book where you could understand the relationship between things and again construct yourself a mental picture of all the very important knowledge. And I started to put some pieces of paper together, cards, index cards. And I said to myself, I won't be able to manage unless I have a computer. And of course, back then you couldn't I mean, I couldn't afford an IBM computer, one of those mainframes, what they call the mini computers, which would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was 1976 or 7 was the beginning of microcomputers, but you had to build it yourself. There was nothing that you could just buy off the shelf. So I ordered a kit from California, and in my apartment in New York, I soldered for 2 weeks, and then I plugged the computer in the socket, and the screen said, "Okay, okay, okay." And I said, "Oh Christ, now I have to teach myself software." And I took a 40-year or 50-year detour in my career. I basically became a software guy and eventually ended up teaching it at various universities. And so I stopped writing nonfiction because of that immersion in computer science.
Right. Wow.
So I'm interested to know what is the process on how you record a narration. Can you explain that to me?
Yes. So, well, as you said, for any of these, I have to audition for them on ACX or other platforms. And, for everything I audition for, I'm up against over a dozen or several dozens of other narrators, and I have to hope for the best. And then once I get a book, the first step, and you would be surprised how many people want to skip this step, is the first step is to read the whole book, start to finish, before even uttering a word into a microphone. You have to read the whole thing. I always say, not that this happened in your book, but you don't want to get to like page 300 and then find out that the main character has an Irish accent that you haven't been doing all this time. So you have to read the whole book. And I go through and I
By the
make
way,
notes.
Irish accent is something you do beautifully.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
It pops up a couple. She pops up a couple times, yes,
That's
in the book.
right. Siobhan.
Um,
You even
yes.
say her name correctly.
Oh yes. Well, I was like, I knew a Siobhan growing up, so I knew that one.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I read the whole book. I make notes, um, and yeah, one then I usually like to do I cut it into pieces. Like I don't try to narrate too much at once, because you get tired, you get fatigued, and the quality suffers for it. So I try to break it up. I like to do a chapter or two chapters at a time. And as you're recording, no one can read for 20 minutes straight or even 5 minutes straight without making a mistake somewhere. So, you read until you make a mistake and then you stop and then you just start from the beginning of that sentence again and you roll back a little bit and you kind of read along with yourself to roll into it so that keeps the momentum going.
Mm.
And then, so once each chapter is recorded, I have a whole little workflow in Adobe Audition of effects that go on it, filters. It brings it up to the proper decibel levels for ACX has very specific standards on what that the audio has to meet for it to be distributed on Audible. Um, but then I also have to go through and listen and go through and do myself, is there an S that's too sharp, or is there some kind of mouth click, or is there some kind of pop noise here? And sometimes I can fix it, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes I just have to go back into the booth and redo it. Um, and then, yes, and then once I did that, I would upload the chapters. You would listen to them, and you would either say, "Sounds great," or you would be like, "Oh, can we try this?" And then on and on and on until we finish the book.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic progress process. And you also have a booth
I
in
do.
your
Yes. Yeah, right here in my home, I've turned my walk-in closet into a booth. I still have my clothes in there because it's good for the acoustics.
yeah,
You want it to be, you don't want to be, echoing off the walls. You want it to be
right.
sound to be very acoustically dead. So that it's very clear into the microphone because those microphones will pick up everything. So you have to be very
Yeah.
careful on
After I saw a picture of your booth, I bought this microphone.
very nice.
How many books have you narrated? And tell me a little bit about yourself, your background.
So, yeah, I'm actually relatively new to audiobooks. Awe was my third um, book. I have a fourth that I've finished and is going through the process of being distributed and more lined up. Um, and so while I'm new to audiobook narrating, I've been acting since I was 12, 13. I went to school for theater. I graduated from Oklahoma City University with a BFA in acting. And I've continued to do theater. I still do theater. But over the last really year or two, I kind of decided I wanted to pivot into the voiceover world because liked I just liked I like the independence of voiceover. I like kind of being my own boss and working on my own schedule and being able to, really like doing an audiobook is like doing a play, but you get to play all the characters and you don't have to leave your house. So, um, yeah, so I'm really a stage actor, still a stage actor, but turned audiobook narrator.
I hear you're about to perform in a new production. Can you tell me?
Yeah, I'm doing a production of Jersey Boys at sort of my home theater here. It's called the Milton Theater in Delaware. And yes, I start rehearsals for that in less than 2 weeks. So yeah.
Fantastic.
So now's my turn. I'd like to hear a little bit about you, your passions. I've heard some people are calling you the most interesting man in the world, and I've even heard that an asteroid was named after you. I would love to hear some elaboration on that.
Well, I am passionate about physics, well, science, but physics, astrophysics in particular, in cosmology. I don't think there's any bigger question than that. It's interesting when I was about 12 years old, even though I'm only half Jewish, in fact, I'm a God-fearing agnostic, just like Pick, but I was um, I was doing my preparing for my bar mitzvah, and I had these big discussions with my rabbi, and I told him, I have really a hard time believing that there is a old man with a beard looking up, down, I mean, being up there and looking down on me and judging every one of my actions. And he looked at me and said, Pierre, do you believe that the Earth, you're living on the Earth, which is one of the planets that's circling the sun? I said, yes. Do you believe the sun is just one of the 100 billion, perhaps more stars in our galaxy? Yes. Do you believe that our galaxy, the Milky Way, is just one out of the 100 billion or trillion galaxies in the universe? Yes. He looked at me and says, Pierre, if God can do all this, don't you think he can also take care of you?
What that's
So
very
it was a charming discussion I had with my rabbi, but I still have an issue with believing in something that I can't prove, if you will. Anyway, but as I said, I'm a God-fearing agnostic, so I play both sides. And it's just like being an atheist is something that I don't understand because it's difficult to prove the absence of God in any case. So science is really my great passion. And I've been interested in it since, I don't know, my very early teens.
Mm.
And I've been somewhat successful in my career, and I was able to support some research. I endowed a center at Stanford that does 3D simulation of the very beginning of the universe, and it's absolutely extraordinary what they can do.
Wow.
Uh, so uh, so my name is on the wall somewhere, and at the Cowley Institute for Particle Astrophysics Cosmology. And my hobby is to actually travel and visit all the labs, the observatories that I can. I even went to the South Pole. I visited
Wow.
observatories at the highest mountains and went to the deepest mines where they search for either neutrinos or I just came back from Japan. Kamiokande is where they discovered that neutrinos change flavor. They got two Nobel Prize out of that.
Oh, wow.
And or they also look for dark matter signatures of dark matter. They haven't been successful so far. Anyway, so that's my great passion. And as far as the most interesting man in the world, one fellow, said that to me because he was impressed that I was able to do all these wonderful trips, and I knew so many of the real scientists who are doing the work, who are so impressive. And one of them, uh, one of them, no matter what book or movie I have to talk about, he's read it and he's seen it.
Uh,
And he's one of the top astrophysicists in the world. He's received more prize than I can calculate. So I told him, when you die, and when I die, I want to be reincarnated as you. That's the kind of respect that I have for these people.
yeah, wow.
Absolutely extraordinary. Uh, and actually, the same fellow also called me a physicist whisperer, which perhaps is a better term than the most interesting man in the world, besides the fact that I don't drink alcohol that much.
Yeah, there's a certain branding that comes along with that. Um, but yeah, that's really fascinating. You've lived a great life and have a lot of accomplishments, and your passion for science certainly comes through in the book. And I feel like there might be a little of you in Peak, being that he's very much a Renaissance man and has a lot of um, things that he's not only interested in but very good at. Um,
Well,
so,
I have to tell you a little story. When I was in high school, in a pensionnat in the Alps in Switzerland,
mhm.
um, and as I mentioned, I used to read a lot. That is one of the great sadness that of our my children's generation. They just don't read, and I think that's a big, big loss for them. Uh, a terrible loss, really.
Mhm.
So I'm encouraging my kids to read, um, um, even if I have to write the damn books
For them to read it.
to get them interested. Um, but uh, there used to be this competition in that school where you something like basically they test your common knowledge, I think it's called, or general culture, and I used to win all the time. So that professor called me Pic de la Mirandole. But the name, I explained that actually in awe. It was a Renaissance man who was reputed to know everything. Of course, back then, the horizon of science was much shorter than it is today, and it was possible to know almost everything.
Right, right.
So Pic de la Mirandole, was reputed to know everything, and that's why this professor called me Pic de la Mirandole. And so I used Pic, but not de la Mirandole as a last name for my hero in awe, Pic de Lucrèce, because I have a great admiration for Lucretius, who wrote De Rerum Natura, and during the Renaissance, and it was one of the foundation of the literature of the Renaissance. Of course, Lucretius lived, around Jesus Christ. So uh, that's why I use Pic de Lucrèce as the name of my great hero.
Yeah, wow. So, speaking of, do you have any other books in the works coming?
Yes, I am. I've been thinking and starting to write the outline of a book, and it's very probable that I'll be using Pic de Lucrèce and Lily Lee again. These two characters have received a lot of affection from many readers, and I have a lot of affection for them as well. Um, so I'm thinking of writing a book where I explore what would happen if AI feels threatened.
Hmm.
So, uh,
Um, yeah. So that's very exciting that you have maybe more in the works for Peak and Lily. I have to say, I spent a lot of time with those characters, so I definitely am a
I
little happy.
certainly will want you to narrate the next book as well.
Well, you just let me know. I will put you on my calendar and we will get to work.
Thank you very much, Jordan. I appreciate the time you gave to me and this.
Yes, it was my
Take
pleasure.
care.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely. So long.
Yes,
Bye bye.
goodbye.